Washington's going bowling.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars got a really fun post-game show coming at all the Everydayers today. We're going to talk about all the positives that we saw on the field from Washington's 31-19 victory over UCLA. We're going to talk about the potential quarterback change because Jedd Fisch, gave some hints that's going to be a very long bye week. So, a lot for us to talk about here on Locked On Huskies. And hey, for all the Everydayers, anybody who might be tuning in, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, like, comment, make sure you follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're on all social media platforms as well at Locked On Huskies. So go follow us wherever you just want more Husky stuff, because that's what we're here for. But Lars, the big news of the day, again, Washington wins 31-19 over UCLA. They're going bowling.
It did not look convincing in the first half. I'll give you that. And I think it was one of those where it's like, are they really about to do this? Are they really? And I just got to get this off my chest because, again, the way the game ended allows us to do this because it's like, and it's not, I understand my timeline, and I know your timeline is blown up with Will Rogers slander, and I get it. But at the same point, Will's been a good soldier. The first interception, not really his fault, kind of just whatever. Second one was like, okay, let's go to DeMond. And we had the full DeMond Williams experience where you got to see exactly what he could do. And I think no matter what, you don't always felt like they were going to win this game. It was just going to be closer if Will was the quarterback because, as we saw, like UCLA was able to get a lot of pressure on both Will and DeMond. The one difference that we've known from day one is DeMond can be a magician. Will can kind of make miracles or get massacred. And it's there's no in between.
So I have a lot of thoughts on this. Obviously, one thing that you and I have said at a large point of the season where, hey, the game to keep an eye on where things like this could happen has always been the UCLA game. We got receipts going back multiple weeks saying, hey, if something's going to happen, this would be the time where it does. So shout out to us for that, first of all. But yeah, that's the thing where, Jedd talked about it after the game, and we're going to get more into this because I have so many things that I want to make sure we get to in this opening segment where the thing about Will that I just really want to make very clear is shout out to him as a leader. First and foremost, we had Jake Butt come on the show and talk about Will, telling Jedd, hey, I'm willing to step aside and let DeMond, become more of a leader because we know this is his team and he is the future of this team. And when he got pulled, he didn't sit on the bench and pout, man. He came right over to to DeMond, slapped him on the helmet, gave him a high five and said, let's go. And when you and I were, down there at the end of the game, that's all we saw too, is him pumping up DeMond and being a leader and being involved every single point he got. So shout out to him for all that. But Lars, we're going to get way more into the quarterback stuff in itself, because honestly, I don't think that was the biggest story of this game where that's my hot take for today is I don't. And it's not Russell Davis either. It was the front seven as a whole and the offense with DeMond, the offense around him, where I want to start on the offensive side here, since that's where we've been, where I look at the offense and I say, as soon as DeMond came in, the pace changed. They didn't necessarily go up tempo, but everything looked faster. Everything looked so much faster, and there was so much more room for Jonah, and there was so much more room for, the receivers and everything they were doing, and the ball was coming out quicker, and everything just looked like it was way more in sync. And like I said, to go back to hot take, DeMond was a huge part of all this, but I think it was just, this is what we've been waiting to see, where this is the Jedd Fisch from Arizona that we were promised. This is what we were looking for that entire time. And seeing that was a huge sign going forward where it's, hey, now you're bowl eligible. You get all those extra practices in. That's a huge positive. And then on top of that, this is what we wanted to see going into next season. Jedd talks about building. What we saw on the field today is exactly what we've been waiting for.
And equally so, I'm going to take your other point because both good points. But the front, because you mentioned that the front seven 6 sacks. So I got a question for you. Over the last 7 games, do you think UW had more sacks combined in those games or tonight?
Tonight. I know that for a fact. Yeah.
Right. Well, by 1. But again, because you're going through it, no sacks the last 3 games, and then 1 sack each of the last 3 games prior to that. The last multi-sack game was Northwestern. So you add that up, 2, 4, 5. UW had 6. Russell Davis had 3 on his own. So again, we kind of want to highlight Russell Davis a little bit here, but again, it wasn't just him. It was Voight Newfie, who shout out to Voight for thanking my dad, wishing him a happy birthday when he saw him after the game. And it was just all around shout out. I had to slide that one in there. But again, it was one of those things where this was a game UW could not lose. And this is no offense to UCLA because they came in on a 3-game win streak a lot better than we thought they were. And they kind of showed that in the first half. But to your point, talking about the depth and the building process of it, we thought Russell Davis would be more of a factor. Then he gets hurt before the season, so scratch that. But then comes in on a game like tonight where he had 1 tackle against Penn State and then just went off tonight. Like, this was Russell Davis. Now, again, wasn't just him, but he was kind of the benefactor of a lot of that. And then you talk about Alfonso Giputala, Voight Newfie, all of it working together. If the defense doesn't keep that going in the second half, sure, the offense gets its points and things like that, but I think it becomes a lot harder and a bigger uphill climb where it just kind of seemed like whether it was the defense feeding off of Damon feeding off the defense, whichever one you want, because the defense played pretty well in the first half too. Not great, but, not terrible, all things considered. And so it really just seemed like the game, no pun intended here, was building, and it just built all the way to the end. And you could see it where it's, if not for a cheap UCLA touchdown in the fourth quarter late in that game, this is really a 31-13 game. Let's be real. This is kind of like, and I know this is going to be a terrible example, the national championship. Washington is Michigan, and UCLA is Washington that way because, again, same score, 31-13. And it just really seemed like there was a significant gap, but that didn't feel that way in the first half.
So I like where you're going with that. Another guy who I need to mention, because something you and I talked about and figured this out, a shout out to our buddy Alex Katzen, who helped us out with that as well, is Sebastian Valdez. That dude was a menace tonight. That guy was in the backfield all the time, getting so much pressure on Ethan Garbers, did get a sack. He's got another year of eligibility. That's something where if he wants to use that, hey, you talk about building, that's a huge part of that as well. Shout out to everybody. Russell Davis, I want to get to him now because there are so many other guys that we need to talk about when we, get to the end of this as well, where Russell Davis, as you said, Lars, when he got here, I was really curious to see how he was going to be used because we looked at everybody else in that room, right? Where we knew Isaiah Ward was coming. I know he committed a couple days before Isaiah, but we knew Isaiah was going to be coming as well. Lance Holtzclaw was already there. Zach Durfee, Jacob Lane. We didn't know about Jaden Wayne at the time. Voy as well. So there were already so many guys in the room, and it was, hey, where's Russell Davis going to fit? And it kind of felt like it was going to be a long-term thing where, he'd played in every game for Jedd over the first 2 years down there. So it was, okay, this is interesting. And then after missing a lot of the season with an injury, as you said, he just explodes tonight and was just absolutely tremendous. And that's such a great sign moving forward where, let's be honest, we don't expect him to have another 3-sack game in his career because those are unfair expectations to have for anybody ever. Right? Like even Myles Garrett, you don't expect that guy, or TJ Watt, you don't expect them to go out and have 3-sack games in the NFL every weekend. That's not how this works. But you look at what that guy is and you look at everything, because with our buddy Alex Katzen, we're having this conversation after the game. It's, hey, outside of Voy, and I believe Deshaun Lynch has a year if he wants it. We'll see how that works out. Everybody, and Maurice Himes, who it seems like is walking, might try to use eligibility elsewhere. This edge room is coming back. This edge room is all going to be together next season. And so you look at what these extra practices mean, what going bowling and all this is, that's what it is. It's all of these guys are coming back along the front line. And if you can have this pass rush where the schedule looks a whole lot different next year, Lars, we could be having a very different conversation as we sit here on, November 16th in 2025. So that's all really exciting. But a big part of 2025 is the quarterback room. which we'll get to right after message from our friends over at Omaha Steaks, because nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience that consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off at site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. So, Lars, like we said in the opener, Jedd Fisch was non-committal at quarterback, and he said, hey, I might not even say anything. Got 2 weeks to figure that out because Washington's heading into a bye week before going down to Oregon, so there's a lot going on, a lot to figure out there. But on top of that, one of the reasons that you and I have been in Will Rogers' corner all season long is because, yeah, there have been moments where he didn't necessarily look great, where we knew what he was. We knew he was going to be a bridge quarterback throughout his time here. But he hadn't done anything that said, it's time for Damon to take the job. I don't feel that that was the case tonight, where I love Will. I think he's done a great job doing exactly what he came here to do, which was being a necessary, needed bridge quarterback, where you and I thought that future might be Austin Mack. Then everything happened the way that it did. Now it's Damon Williams, but it's a very similar situation, right? Where he was coming in, he was going to take that job, he was going to have it for a year and hand the reins over to a young guy who you think might be the face of the program for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it might be. So that's what happened here. And tonight, I don't want to say finally, because that's not fair. He looked like somebody who was not ready to keep the job anymore. And when Damon came in, things looked very different, because that second interception was the one where it was, oh, what was he doing? Like that really wasn't a pretty throw. And there were other throws on the night where it looked like he was out of rhythm and different little things like that. But you put Damon in the game and all of a sudden everything changes, where we're sitting up there in the press box, and those first couple of runs that he had where he was just trying to get out of the pocket. I know he gained 12 on one of them and 6 on the next, where they're both just scrambles, not even designed runs. But you and I were just kind of looking at each other like, how did he do that, man? Like you look at exactly what you want to see moving forward, and it's that.
It's why I call him a magician, because really that's what he can do. And it's not just him as a runner, but that's been the whole thing this season, where I think, if we're being honest, Damon has significantly improved as a passer from, call it, the Apple Cup, where he has that if you check down to Jonah. And one thing that, somebody told me on the sideline, a former UW quarterback pointed out to me, was we knew how good he was as a runner. That's been evident from day one. It's not to poo-poo the point, but it's just like, look, we know Damon can run, and we know Will obviously is nowhere near the runner that Damon is, but it's about the whole operation of a quarterback. You can't just throw Damon in there and say, hey, you know what? We're just letting it rip with the freshman. Because, by the way, as good as Damon was tonight in this season so far, if a full season of Damon, you could also be 3-9, 5-7. Like, you could still have Damon look good and be like, hey, there's a great future, but you actually don't have the wins. Where I think that's been the necessary bridge that Will has brought, is that veteran experience, breaking down film in the quarterback room, helping Damon as a fellow people quarterback, where I think that's something that Jedd has hit on a lot this season. And I think that's what's shown in his growth this season.
So one thing that I just want to make sure we add in there, that because everything you made is a fantastic point, but there's one extra gigantic one that is extremely important. Going on the road. Washington has not won a road game this year. Like that is what it is. But going on the road and looking, where there were points in the second half against Penn State last week where Damon just looked like a freshman quarterback on the road, which makes things tough. And if you're saying, hey, yeah, let's throw him in that environment. Let's just say, for example, at Rutgers or at Iowa, when the season looks like it could have gone a lot different, this is a very different conversation, right? Where, maybe things do go sideways in both those games. So that's one thing that Will has provided, where he hasn't looked perfect. We know that. But that presence that he provides, especially on the road, and is something where you still, as we've seen all season, put Demond in, give him that experience, but don't dump all that on him right away as a true freshman, is very, very valuable.
And you kind of have to, it's what we've said all season, where you can't do that to a fifth year. Let's say you don't bring in Will, but you're just talking about Demond and Shaker Kendall. We're having a completely different discussion. If it's pretty much anybody not a record-setting SEC quarterback who, what his NFL prospects are, so be it. Here's the problem that Jedd boxed himself into a corner with. And it's not a problem, but it's why Demond has remained the starter for so long. What was Jedd's pitch to Will? You can go transfer somewhere else, or you can learn how to be an NFL quarterback. And that's basically, now, has Will played himself into a trap? Who knows? And probably not. But you know what? I think Will, kind of like Jake Browning, where it's like, he's too much of a football savant, coach's son, all that. There's no way he doesn't get a roster shot in the NFL, let's call it that, as a backup, whatever. And that's fine, because guess what? That's still a guy that's in the NFL that Jedd could say, hey, look, I got another quarterback in the NFL and a brand new system in 1 year. And those are things that Jedd can now sell and also use for Demond to say, hey, you know what? He got to learn from an NFL quarterback. Same thing with what we would have thought from Austin Mack, which was when he came in to learn from Penix. That's what Austin Mack came to do. He only enrolled early, as Ryan Grubb told us, to learn from Michael Penix. There was zero chance Austin Mack was playing last season. Zero. Actually, -0, for being honest. But in that same vein, that's kind of what you need to do, is you're kind of looking ahead, because now we have this next quarterback class coming in where you're bringing in 2. You really only have Demond, but now you know Demond's going to be your face, and having all that veteran knowledge to soak up, having the whiteout experience where he gets a whole second half. I honestly can envision a case, and we probably should kind of wrap this back into the quarterback change. Do we see a change going into Oregon? I'll address that in the sense of, we've seen UW play both of them on the field at the same time. Why not start the Oregon game off with that play?
That'd be interesting. I'd certainly enjoy seeing that. So let's get to that. Sorry, because I think that with everything we just talked about, it's curious, right? Where you look at it and there's so many different ways that you can attack this. You can look at it and say Demond played well enough to win the job, which could absolutely be the case. And that could absolutely be true. But you can also look at it and say, from that same perspective of, hey, we've got nothing to lose. We're going up against an 11-0 Oregon team, right? Like, let's say they beat Wisconsin on Saturday. We're going up against an 11-0, number 1 in the country Oregon team. You don't want to give Demond that shot to pull off that massive upset. But at the same point, you can say Will's floor might be enough to just be serviceable in that game, and you can still split reps.
Let me give you it, because I've been with you on that point the entire season until I saw something that completely changed my mind before this game.
Okay.
Jaden Daniels goes into Autzen a couple of years ago and beats Justin Herbert in Oregon as a freshman. That door.
I thought that was at Arizona State.
Or was that either way? But either way, I mean, it's a little bit different. But my point is, let the freshman go. Let him rip it. Sure. Because that could give you the energy to say, you know what? Washington probably double-digit dog going into that game. But the energy that Demond brings to this offense, and it's not an indictment of Will. I can't keep repeating that enough. It's not an indictment of Will. It's just Demond has it.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And that going into Autzen, I could easily see Jedd saying, you know what? We won't name a starter. Will might take the first snap. Demond gets the second quarter through on and ends up winning that game. I'm not guaranteeing it, but that no longer would surprise me. And I think that, and imagine, because again, Oregon still makes the playoffs in that scenario, probably a 1-loss Oregon team. I'm gonna making that.
Yeah, we don't want that, but you know,
no. But that's where this realistic path comes into play. Where Washington can win that game, Oregon is no loss for wear. They're still in the playoffs. Washington now gets a massive boost going into next season. Jedd says, "Hey, I beat the number 1 team in the country," which we should probably get to, kind of tying in with the positives. The guys you're selling to bring in the 25 class can say, hey, wow, watched you beat UCLA. Now you just beat the number 1 team on the road. If there's no way UW, because here's the thing, in 2010, they went winless on the road. They went 5-7. You're now at 6 wins. This is what Jedd has to do to get to 7.
So I like where you're going with that. That was a perfect transition because I have a stat that I want to throw at the everydayers, but I'll do it on the other side of the break, which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Got a fun little anytime touchdown parlay for all the everydayers out there for this Sunday. Really like Roma Dunze, anytime touchdown. I think the Bears are going to try to get him rolling. And a fellow rookie that I think needs to get in the end zone a lot more down the stretch and maybe increase his chances for rookie of the year. That'd be fun to see. Las Vegas Raiders tight end Brock Bowers. You should go check out all those odds and so many more over on FanDuel. So Lars, first positive. I wrote about this a little bit over on Huskies Wire that Jedd Fisch was in very dangerous territory. His offense was in danger of being compared to John Donovan's in terms of points per game. Washington came into this game at 21.8. Donovan finished 2021 at 21.5. So concerningly similar. Washington eclipsed the 30-point mark. They scored 31 points. That was the first time they've done that since the second game of the season. Since Eastern Michigan. That was the last time they scored 30 points. So just a nice little thing throw out there to just kind of wrap up that quarterback conversation, talk about that, is that boost from DeMond really did help put them over the edge. So that's great. You'll love to see that. But let's get into some of these other positives because there's a whole lot that you can take away from this. And Lars, I would say 90% of it is from guys that are probably going to be on this roster in 2025.
First one being Jonah Coleman. Gets over 1,000 yards, 95 and 2 touchdowns against a very good UCLA run defense. And that was the
number
other
7
thing
in the country.
Exactly. And well, the craziest thing is I remember looking up in the first half, and I got the stats right here. I should probably pull them up here. But it's one of those where it was like it was a really weird number. It was like Jonah was like 4 for 25 with 1 touchdown. It was a weird kind of sequence when you look at it. And then just that second half, when I asked Jonah after the game, like, what does DeMond bring this offense that's different? Because it's clearly something. And he's like, it just lets us be us. And I think it allows Jonah to have those extra gap yardage, and that it just changes the dynamic of the offense. And that's why Jonah, where, shout out to Jonah for liking my Andy Marsh tweet. But, which again, ties everything together. It's like Jonah probably coming back now. And again, we can understand if he doesn't. He hasn't confirmed 100% that he is. I think Jonah's just getting started at Washington. This year is just getting started. Everything about this year is just getting started. Now, some guys probably can go, a few might that probably could come back. But for the most part, I'm not sure UW's going to have to dip into the portal much because of some of these guys coming back like Jonah.
I agree. And that's such a big thing. Like you said, gets over the 1,000-yard mark. It's up to 9 touchdowns now on the season. He looked really good. 21 carries, 95 yards against, the number 7 rushing defense in the country. So shout out to him for that. He looked like himself. And this is something where I'm really excited about the offseason content we can have just surrounding Jonah if he does announce that he's coming back. Where it's certainly not on the Michael Penix, Roma Dunze announcement that they're coming back for 2023, but that's going to be really exciting, man, because he's such a fun building block. And that's one of the reasons I want to circle, and why I led with this when we talked about this earlier, why I want to circle back around to the defense is this pass rush, for the most part, is going to be here next year. So you look at all these edge rushers and you look at the way the schedule lines up and some of the teams that Washington will have to face. And I mean that in terms of, going to UCLA, Maryland and Ohio State are 2 of the teams that are coming in that Washington missed this season. They like to throw the ball a whole lot more than a lot of the teams they saw this year. So that's just a small sample size. But I look at that and I look at this defensive line and I look at what all these pass rushers can be with another year in the Steve Belichick defense. Now that they're, adjusting and adapting and they're growing, that's something I'm really excited about. And I look at 6 sacks and I say, yeah, that's unrealistic. We're not going to see that every week. But you look at other things where I got a text from our good buddy Spencer McLaughlin during the game, and I know he's shaking in his duck boots down in Eugene, saying, man, Steve Belichick is so good. He's so good at his job. And that's been the biggest thing all year. Watching that guy scheme up different ways to get after quarterbacks is so much fun, right? You look at Lance Holtzclaw. He was a guy whose name's not going to pop up in the stat sheet with a sack, but he was in the backfield all night long. Jedd Fisch shouted him out after the game. There are a bunch of guys like that in the secondary. We saw on the defensive line, we saw Zach Durfee suit up today. He was limited. Jedd Fisch said he was a little banged up after the game. So we'll see what that looks like for Oregon. But again, all these guys, especially, you think about Zach, where we thought that was a guy that was going to be off the NFL, but the injuries have limited him, and probably you're going to force him to come back, which with this defense is going to be a great thing. So you look at another guy who I know you love talking about, where, we got to see that special teams hit he had at the end of the game up close and personal, Kamori House. You start looking at what this front seven could be next season, and you say, that's a Big Ten front seven.
And not only that, kind of what's the key catalyst in terms of tonight's scoring besides Jonah? The irony of two tight ends scoring.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but Ed Kolecki gets one and Decker gets one. I just find that ironic given what transpired about a week ago. All things considered, it's like, hey, you know what? We haven't really seen a ton of the tight ends. Decker could have had one against Penn State, and this gets back to something else I talked with somebody on the sidelines about as the game was winding down, where everything comes down in the season to about a dozen or so plays. You can do all the preparation you want. You can do all this and that. One of those plays was last week, Damon just overthrowing Decker. Yep. And so one of those where it ends up coming. But imagine it with Damon, connected on that one last week and then connects on now the momentum is even more there. So it's just those little, very small things. But this is something that I talked to Yogi Roth about at Big Ten Media Day, where he said, look, Jedd was in a lot of one-score games his first year at Arizona. Second year got a little bit better in that regard. I would love to ask Jedd, and we're going to on Monday, has this season kind of been a 2-1 of your first season at Arizona, where you were 5-7 and 1-11? Obviously, they're not 1-11 or 5-7. It's like, so how much has Jedd learned? Because those are Decker is going to be a significant piece to this. Decker and the tight ends coming in are going to be a significant piece of this offense.
So there's one sentence that you slid in there that I think is the best one. What has Jedd learned? We've seen that. We have seen what he's learned, where we were having this conversation during the game. And these are all things we love, talking about that and getting able to just bring to the show, is we were talking about the play calling in the red zone. A commitment to running the football, which we did not see. And then in a game where, you and I spent half our Thursday show talking about Denzel Boston, talking about, hey, this guy should have a big impact in this game since UCLA's run defense, you might want to stay away from that. No, we're going to make sure Jonah scores twice. We're going to make sure we pound the rock inside the red zone like a Big Ten team would, where, I think some of the messaging, it is what it is, right? Where Jedd's like, hey, we're a Big Ten team. We need to be big. We need to be this. We need to be that. And I look at what he did in this game in terms, especially, inside the 10-yard line, it was, okay, that's what you do. You pound the rock with your star running back, who is 5'9" and 230 pounds and is an absolute bowling ball near the goal line. And we saw that today. And that's something that over the course of the season, he has learned, because you and I were extremely critical of the red zone play calling early in the season. And honestly, I believe we were well within our rights to do that. But what we've seen since then in these last couple of weeks, where here's a stat for you, Lars, before Will Rogers touchdown, and I know we talked about this on the show the other day as well. Before Will Rogers threw that touchdown to Kolecki Latu, the last touchdown pass that any Husky had thrown, was Damon Williams to Rashid Williams at the end of the Iowa game. And that was a month ago. So that was something where you can look at that and say, oh, was it Will struggling? But you can also look at it and say, hey, deep in the red zone against, USC, they pounded the rock. Jonah Coleman scored twice. Keith Reynolds had the touchdown. You look at the Indiana game and you say, Jonah Coleman scored. Giles Jackson scored and Damon Williams scored, where you found ways to utilize your players and just in the best of their abilities. You found a way to utilize their strengths instead of saying, oh, let me see how this works. Let me see how that works. No, you said, I know this works and we're going to go to that. And that was really nice to see. And we saw that today.
For the first time since week 1, Washington got 4 touchdowns in the red zone.
Yep.
Just let that sink in. We can have some dead air. Let's just let that sink in for a second. So we're absolutely right that, again, the red zone has been an issue, but we saw it against Michigan get better, 5 for 6. We saw it against USC, 4 for 4. They didn't get 4 touchdowns, but is what it is. But you're still getting 4 out of 4. Tonight they were 4 out of 4, but had 28 points. That's something, speaking of what the slid in there earlier, saying, has Jedd learned and improved? That's something I remember asking Jedd early in the season, where it's, what do you want to see in the red zone? Because he's like, well, we got 21. Sure, that's great, but I want 42. Tonight, you probably want 35, 28, and you got 28. So the point is, and Grady, gets a field goal. Shout out Grady for that. It's all the little things. And so the best part about all of this is we have 2 weeks now.
Yeah.
2 weeks for Jedd to cook, for Jedd to think. And that's why that game on November 30th at Austin will be very similar to either 22. I'm trying to think of the last time. Maybe it was 2018 when they went down there and lost, but it was on that overtime field goal. It's going to be a close game. I would be very, very surprised if it's not a possession or 2 game at the end.
So I like where you're going with this, but I know we got to get out of here. One last thing. Lars, the recruiting. The recruiting is something that I need to make sure we spend a couple seconds on here, where Andrew Marsh was on campus. Donovan Olugbode was on campus. There are some 26 kids on campus. IMG just basically took a visit, where if Jedd can find a way to get his foot in the door at IMG, getting Raiden Vinesbright's a great start with that. You can find a way to do that. And we're going to talk about this so much more over the course of the week. So don't go anywhere. Make sure you subscribe, because we're going to be talking a lot of recruiting throughout the week. And if you want more on that, sorry, Lars, do you have something else as well? Do you want to get in there on the recruiting front?
Well, let's just not forget what Steve Belichick said about the guy at IMG too, that he knows. So it's not just Jedd. It's not coach. Just Jedd. That's not insignificant here.
Right. That's very, very fair point as well. But we're going to be dropping whenever we hear stuff. And you and I, we hear things a lot. So if you want to be in the know, the very first know, go check out the link to our Locked On Huskies Insider program, which is down in the description below. Get a free 2-week trial. After that, it's $4.99 a month. You want to get recruiting updates just sent straight to your text messages inbox. That's where you get them. We're sending so many more updates. We got audio that we're uploading from after games that you're not going to find anywhere else. So much more fun stuff. The ability to just shoot us any questions you have via text. We love interacting with all our everydayers. We love getting to know you, just answering any questions you might have around this team and just anything we might know. Again, free 2-week trial. After that, it's $4.99 a month. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all the everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And please, if you just like the content you like we have to offer, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.